Hello and welcome back to the Whole Life podcast. My name is Grace Fielding.
And I'm Paul Woolley. And today we're talking about mental health. Well, Grace, you might remember that at the end of season 1, we gave listeners the opportunity to send in their suggestions for topics that they'd like us to cover on the podcast. Well, they didn't disappoint. I mean, they never do they? Our amazing listeners. And today's topic was just one that was requested, and we absolutely agree. It is such an important one.
Indeed. So, listeners, be assured that you always have a voice and we love to hear from you. And as you'll know, if you've clicked on this podcast, today we're exploring a big and quite a vulnerable topic, actually. But as Paul said, it's a really important one and we definitely don't want to shy away from it.
No, absolutely not. We hear the term mental health, don't we, everywhere. In the media, our families, our friendship circles, more than 1 in 7 UK adults say their mental health is currently either bad or it's worse than it's ever been. What's more, in the UK, 12,100 searches are made for mental health helpline every month. And chances are that even if we're not directly struggling with our own mental health right now, then we know and love someone who is. And so today, we want to explore what we can learn from the Christian story and how we can navigate mental health accordingly.
I find it personally so encouraging to see that this conversation around mental health has become so much of the norm nowadays. And we are so glad today to be joined by an excellent guest to help us think some more about it. Elle Limebear is a songwriter and a worship artist, and she lives in Brighton with her husband and 2 little boys. You may even hear some seagulls in the background today. And this year, she released a beautiful devotional journal titled Say Goodbye to Anxiety, which I have personally used and can vouch for myself. Ellie, hello. It's such a joy to have you on The Whole Life today. Thank you for making time to chat to us.
Oh, well, that is very kind. I am very happy to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
So as we've mentioned, we hear a lot about this term mental health. But Ellie, I wonder if you could unpack it a bit for us. How would you define mental health? How might it be helpful for us to think about it as we start to talk about it?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to say I'm not a professional in the slightest, but I'm just going to be speaking from my experience on this podcast. But I guess for me, that my understanding of mental health is just really the state of your mind, the well-being of your mind, the state of it. And we all have mental health. It's not just one thing. We're all on the spectrum somewhere. Some of us have really good mental health, some really poor, but we're all on the spectrum. And we talk a lot about physical health, but mental health is all to do with the mind and our well-being. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think, so helpful as you did to kind of say that it's something that applies to all of us. It's not just a small proportion of people that have mental health. It's more just kind of how well our mental health is at different times in our life. So as you say, we would love to hear from your experience and your kind of personal journey with this stuff today. So could you share with us a bit of your personal journey with mental health and what specifically led you to write the devotional Say Goodbye to Anxiety?
Yes, so for me, it's definitely been a bit of a journey, and I guess it all kind of spiraled maybe 5 years ago when we were in lockdown, and I realized that I was enjoying it too much. I was almost enjoying not seeing anyone, not going outside, all these things that life throws at you. I didn't have to do, and I was loving that so much. Almost the fact that worried me. I was like, this is not good that I'm enjoying this too much, not seeing people, not having to do things. And so it just got me just really questioning a lot of things. Just what is my life? Like, what is going on here? And there was this one evening, and the Lord just really revealed to me that it's the spirit of fear that has been eating me alive for a very long time. It's anxiety that has had its hold on me for years, and I was completely oblivious. I was completely just coping, making excuses, trying to work out what was going on all for so long, but never really having words to articulate things. And I now look back, even as a teenager, And I had a friend, dear friend, who we'd, organise to hang out weekends, and she would always cancel. And I'd always be so confused, like, why? Like, we're really good friends. Like, I think you like me. What is going on here? And now I look back like, she was really struggling with anxiety and her mental health, and didn't have the words to articulate what was going on then. And there wasn't really a conversation going on then, 10 years ago, about mental health and the struggles and what's going on. And so I think even I look back then, and I definitely was struggling too, but I didn't know how to process. I didn't know what was going on in my mind to really let people in. And so I think this revelation 5 years ago, just realizing I'm not living in freedom. I am not living in the fullness that like Jesus has died for. And it was really devastating, honestly. It was like just all like shame came, guilt, confusion, anger of like, no, wow, this is the beast of anxiety has been nibbling its way at me for years and years since I was a little girl, and has got away with it for so long. um and just like frustration of like, this has to stop now, like I have to tackle this today, every day, because also I just don't want to be old, saggy and grey and be full of fear. Like, I have to tackle this today. I don't want to be a fearful mum, I don't want to be a fearful grandma, I don't want to be a fearful wife anymore, a friend, a sister, a daughter. Like, it's up to me now to like tackle this with God and put things in place. So it's I look back, there's so many things that well, even on that evening, I remember my husband encouraging me to write out everything I'd do if I didn't have fear. And I thought it'd be like, oh yeah, probably just a few things. Like, let me just write a few things down. And it was pages and pages and pages of things, little things to like the really big things, things that I love that I could no longer do, things that I wanted to do or needed to do, I couldn't do. And it was just this really profound yet like harrowing moment of, gosh, I am not free. I am not living in freedom. This is not it. I thought I was free. I lead worship. I'm a Christian. I'm a believer of Jesus. Grew up in church. I'm a joyful person, I would say. I'm a glass half full type of character. Everything's quite all right. But I was like, wow, this piece is not okay though in my life. This is not freedom. And so it's really been a journey of claiming freedom, tackling it with God. I mean, I'll probably talk lots of things that have helped me along the way, but um, the verse that talks about how God renews our mind, that for me is so it. Like, it's been a journey, and it's not a cute little verse that's in there to like make us feel better, but it's actually such a reality that God, who made us, who wired our brain in the first place, who created us in our mother's womb, he can renew our minds and rewire us. And I believe that God can heal in an instant. I believe that he can do that. I've seen it with my own eyes time and time again. But for me, it's definitely been a journey of him renewing my mind and putting things in place practically and spiritually to really help me on this journey to freedom. So yeah, I'd say it's a journey, and I'm still now like anxiety like can rise, but I feel I know more now, and things that have helped me that as soon as can like push it back and tell it to shut up almost. So yeah, that's a bit of my story.
Ellie, where do you think that sense of fear came from that you described so powerfully? And can you plot for us the moment? And I imagine there wasn't just one moment, there have been several moments, and perhaps there continue to be moments where you were aware that there was a shift between your realization of anxiety producing anxiety and, in fact, producing freedom and a sense of flourishing. Can you speak to those things?
Yeah, I feel I guess the root of fear is death, isn't it? In the grand scheme of things, that is it, the fear of, and that's quite a big thing to say, but I guess that is what it is. And there's so many layers to it, isn't there? There's so many layers to it. But I think, yeah, I remember just being a young girl, there's just so much worry, so much, and growing up, but no one knew. I think that was another thing, is that even when I finally realized what was going on. Even my family, like, really? Like, are you have you? Like, even my close family and friends had no idea, because I think I just thought, if I just keep going with this, hopefully it'll go. If I just like put my head down, I hope, keep praying, keep, on my own, no one else will have to worry about me. If I just keep going with this, then hopefully it'll just lift one day and no one have to worry about it. And that is I look back like, that is such a danger when you keep things to yourself and when you just plod on your own. And I realized the enormous shift when I let people in, when I said, actually, this is what's going on, when I was vulnerable and humble enough too. There was a lot of pride in that too. There's so much pride, and that's not me. I'm not anxious. Like, I don't want that label. I don't want that title of being anxious or having anxiety. Like, no, I'm confident. I'm a believer. That is not going to be me. And I think so much wrapped up in that. And it wasn't until I really let people in, and people to pray for me specifically too, of things, and declare things over my life, that's when I saw like real beautiful transformation. Is, this one evening, my beautiful little sister, gathered my close girls, and we just had an evening of prayer and declaration, and prayed over my feet, that like things that were like shackled on me be off in Jesus' name, things that like we could be specific about. And I think that is the power of community. That's the power of letting people in. And I know it's uncomfortable. I find it uncomfortable at times too, but there's such power in letting your guard down and letting people in, young and old, men and women. Do you know what I mean? It's not just young people that are going through this. It is so many of us, so many different generations. The oldies, it's like so many of us. But if we do humble ourselves to let people in and let people pray for us or speak truth over us, I think it's really super powerful. What's the second question you said? Sorry.
Well, you've talked about that, I think, a bit in terms of this trajectory, really, from you have this realization that you've been suffering with anxiety. And I guess one thought is, well, could that not induce anxiety? But then,
Yeah.
in a sense, it did. But then what you've described is also how you went then from that place to being in a place of, well, less anxiety and, in fact, more positively freedom.
Yeah.
So I think you've answered the question. But I'd love to ask you a little bit about perceptions or misconceptions, because you've talked a little bit there indirectly, I think, about the stigma that's associated with anxiety and mental health more generally. What are some of the common misconceptions, would you say, that people have around this whole area?
I think that the misconception that it's just young people struggling with anxiety, like it's a Gen Z thing, sort of thing, because of technology and because of all the phones. Like, yeah, they're really struggling because of all of this. I'm like, no, it's been happening for generations. Anxiety is not like a new thing. It talks about it in the Bible. It's like, this is not a new thing, that actually you would be shocked to know who's probably struggling. And it can be, so I think that's a misconception, that it's just a young people thing. But actually, I have family members way older than me. I have friends from all over who you would never think would be struggling. But I think that's the lie of anxiety too, and that's the sneakiness of the enemy, is that the people that you think are okay are not always okay. The people that you think are like super jolly all the time, like everyone's got something going on in the story, and whether they're speaking about it or not, I think it's just to always have a listening ear, honestly, to ask people really how they're doing, and not just think, they're so loud about it, they're fine, they don't need prayer, they can pray for themselves. It's like, oh no, there's power in coming together for sure, and realizing that not everyone is always 100%.
Yeah. You've referenced, Ellie, the Bible already. How do you see the Christian story speaking into mental health issues? How would you narrate this
Yeah.
if you were to step back and think of the Christian story and the way that it can help us see, frame, reframe our approach to mental health? Where would you begin? How would you do that? How would you navigate that?
Gosh, what a question. What a question. I'll try my best to. Um, but I think the overarching thing for me is that with the Christian story, there's hope, and that isn't always the case. I mean, without Jesus, there is no hope. And what do you put your hope in? You could put your hope in a nice holiday next year, and that might help you for a week. And a new house might help you, and then you get bored of that. Or you could put your hope in things, even people, relationships. But actually, I think the overarching thing for me is that with Jesus, like, there is hope for the world, hope for us, hope for your next door neighbor, that is everlasting and real and sustainable. And that's not gonna like flutter away, that it is a constant thing that we can hold on to. And I love that even like the Bible talks about hope as an anchor, hope as an anchor for our soul. And that is like immovable, an anchor, isn't it? And with an anchor analogy, it's like you can try your best to like go away and think that it's over there, but actually, like, if you have the anchor, like the hope of Jesus, like that is a beautiful, like, concrete thing. And I think even I am almost reassured that I'm not the only one. We are not the only people in this generation going through this. Like, you look through the Bible and even like, you look through the Psalms, it's just like turmoil and so much anxiety and questions and depths of despair and like, what is going on? Like, why are you so downcast, my soul? Like, it's dark. It can be even Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus in those moments, like crying, you know, sweating blood, like distress, anxiety. Like, even Jesus like went through distress, and even Jesus, I mean, the ultimate distress on the cross, but those moments before of anxiety, and he still turned to God, and that's kind of the beautiful thing, isn't it? Praying, finding that moment with God. But yeah, I mean, you could say so much, but I think the best way to deal with this is with Jesus. Like, that is the end thing for me, is that I look back over my journey like, what would I have done? Who'd like to turn to in the dead of night when I'm literally stifled by fear? I cannot move. I cannot even open my eyes because I'm so fearful and so longing for the daylight to like break, that the only thing I could sometimes do is simply say the name Jesus, like just Jesus, 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 and just repeat the name Jesus, because I know the power that it has. Even though I can pray in those moments, I didn't have the words to say. But like, the power of the name of Jesus is enough too. And I think for me, just knowing, just having a relationship with Jesus is enough. And even though I wasn't like healed immediately, and I had the weeks of not leaving my house, and just really confusing times, like the hope that I had in Jesus, though, that one day, and also just kind of getting alongside other people who were maybe on the journey or had come through, the hope that they have and the freedom that they'd like experience, like, it spurs you on, doesn't it? When you hear other people's stories, you're like, oh, come on. So I think that's another reason why community is so important, and I love that is, as a Christian, you get to be part of a beautiful community.
Yeah, you referenced there, Ellie, the Psalms, and you talked about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And in anticipation of our conversation, I thought I'll just start having a little look through the biblical story and see where I can plot this theme of anxiety and mental health. Two things happened. The first is I didn't get beyond the Old Testament, but it's one of those things that when you start to see it, you see it everywhere. So I was really struck by the fact that, whether it's David, who often expresses profound emotional distress and loneliness and despair, and we see that at work in the Psalms, or whether it's Elijah, who experiences despair, even suicidal thoughts after fleeing Jezebel, whether it's Job, who is the classic, isn't he, who just endures just unbelievable suffering and loss, which not surprisingly leads to anxiety and depression, or whether it's Saul, the list could go on, Jeremiah. It's there. It's interesting, isn't it? You start to see it, and then you see this is in fact the exception this is the rule, this is the norm, this is actually maybe more normative in terms of our human experience than we often think. When it comes to the church and the church responding to issues of mental health, where do you think sometimes the church and Christians in general have got it wrong and been unhelpful perhaps in engaging with
Yeah,
this
I
topic?
mean, we're all human, aren't we? And I love that you talked about the human experience there, like what that means. And I think I would say maybe, first of all, maybe just not having the conversation, like maybe just not maybe talking about it for so long, um, that it has been something that's been going on for a long time, but maybe not talking about it. But I think also sometimes I struggle, even when my non-Christians talk about Christians, like the happy clappy Christians who have nothing's wrong, ever wrong, and everything's all together. And how that is just not true, is it? Like we all go through things, whether that's anxiety, whether that's, I mean, just fill in the blank. There's pain, struggle, health things, and relationships things. But I think maybe the fact that we kind of present ourselves maybe too well sometimes with each other, and that vulnerability piece of if someone actually is like, how are you doing? Like, you don't have to say I'm fine. You don't actually have to say, yeah, not bad. You, thanks. Like we're so British as too. I think it's so British, isn't it?
We are.
But actually, there is something so special about the community of church, like the family of God, and the access we have to so many amazing people with gifts and prayer and prophecy, and so many gifts within the church. And I think it's a shame when we shut ourselves off to all of that, to people in the church who are willing to speak into our lives or help or pray. And I definitely think that the other hand of that, the flip of that, is that sometimes it can be too over spiritual and bombarding in a sense where it's people maybe not sometimes seeing the reality of like the situation. And I 100% bring God into everything we pray. I believe that, but sometimes there can be maybe an over spiritualization with things where it becomes almost too much too, if you kind of get my drift, is that there's so much power in all of it. But I think acknowledging the humanness of situations and struggles, without just like kind of coating it with a wham bam something, but like actually truly listening to people, sitting down and kind of pushing people to a side. But I think people are getting better, and because of this conversation that is happening, I think people are more aware and more gracious and willing to learn and come alongside people, and I guess have more grace for people too. I think there's that is really beautiful. But yeah, I don't know, there's so many things you could say, isn't it? But I think the church has so many amazing ways that they're doing it too.
And if I can play devil's advocate for a moment, Ellie, I mean, Grace, can I use that phrase on this podcast?
Ooh,
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
if we have before, but anyway, you get my drift. There could be there is a line of argument that would suggest that discussion about mental health and consciousness of mental health isn't in part a luxury of living in an affluent society, where if we compare ourselves with previous generations, we haven't lived, quite frankly, in terms of some of the kind of the challenges that they faced. And there is discussion around also the need to build resilience. I've been particularly with young people and how we build a generation who are resilient and able to withstand criticism and not being liked and being unfollowed on social media, etc. How would you respond to that? I mean, both those things, they're not sort of mutually exclusive. I guess you can have all those things clustered together. But what would you give that line of thought any truck?
That often, because sometimes I do think back. Yeah, we live in a day that is so different. Like you said, the luxury and being in the first world. There's different worries, aren't there? There's different like things to be anxious about, I guess. And I do think about that often, because and then that brings kind of like again, shame, weirdly, and guilt. Like, I shouldn't. Well, I'm fine then. You know, I would think that often. Like, but I'm not in the worst category. Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I've got a roof over my head. I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. I've got like beans on toast is fine. Like, whatever. And then I think that, but I think everything is, what's the word? I don't want people to disqualify themselves from struggling because of the comparison of, oh, well, they're worse though, or they're better. That actually everything is valid. How you're feeling is valid. But I definitely agree with you with the resilience thing, is that we keep moving forward though. We don't sit in it. We don't want to sit in this. We don't want to just like moan and groan and complain. We want to move forward with this and continue to move forward together. But I 100% like agree too on both sides. I think there's so many ways to look at it. But yeah, just got to be honest. We've got to be honest with ourselves and honest with people.
Ellie, I love what you said earlier about this idea of kind of trying to encourage people not to have to stay kind of quiet or to keep it a secret when they're struggling with their mental health. And it struck me that actually the devotional journey, Say Goodbye to Anxiety, was such a good example of that, because I think sometimes when you hear or you see of other people struggling, it almost gives you permission to be honest about where you're at yourself. I wonder, for those that maybe haven't either used the devotional journey or heard of it, if you could explain a little bit about what's in it for them, like what kind of, why, if you're struggling with your mental health, like why would it be a great thing? I know you spoke about kind of bringing God into everything and kind of bringing our mental health to Jesus. What does that look like in the context of the devotional journey?
There's so many amazing resources out there that talk and like help with this topic. You know, I myself experienced so many, I mean, amazing podcasts, books, you name it, courses. But I think for us personally, both me and Jane, we'd experienced it and experienced like freedom, and basically just wanted to like pass on things that we'd learned and tools that we'd learned, to spiritual things and practical things. And Jane has been such an amazing figure in my life, who I'd go to in my depths of despair. I'd go to her house, have a cup of tea, and there'd be times where she'd be like, just run outside and scream, just go into my garden, run around and scream. And it's just things like that where you're just like, amazing, thank you for just allowing me to just do that. So writing it with her, this book, was such a beautiful gift, because you know, she's like 10 years older than me, but we have such different stories. And you know, she talks about her story in the book, and she was on medication, and yeah, very different story to mine, but yeah, we've experienced the freedom that God gives. And so I think we wanted to do a devotional journal specifically, not just a book, just because the day to day can just so change too. Like one day you might be feeling great, and the next day you might, oh, it's back, it's, you know, here. So we really wanted to create something that really was for the day to day, and a little bite-sized page that you can kind of eat up, whether it's having your breakfast, going to bed, before bed, or on your way on the bus, or whatever it looks like. Something that is easily digestible, with scripture too. It's almost just like a little nudge of encouragement, honestly, but with then questions for the day, for you to like sit with God, to have time with him, to process, to really ask those questions maybe that you've never even asked before, maybe you've never gone there, but to just sit with him. And we've included a song for every day too, specifically around the theme of the day. We've chosen it specifically so throughout the day you can keep on playing it, or that the truth just really like settles in, that it reminds you throughout the day of what we've been maybe speaking about. So we just really wanted to create this book just as like almost like a baton of like, we're passing it on, we're like passing on what we've learned. Like, we haven't got it all together. We're not professionals in the slightest. Like, we're just learning ourselves and have experienced the goodness that we want to like tell people about. And so, 40 days is not long, but it's not too short. But we just hope it just helps people like again, men and women, it's not just for ladies, it's for young and old, that to sit, like, to dedicate like time for your healing, to like, let's be practical about this too, like, let's not just go around, but actually this, we hope that this book can be like a really practical thing for people to be like, I'm going to do that, like, let's tackle this, and people are doing it together as friends, to having little book clubs that are like doing this together, which I think is so beautiful, that yeah, to not just do it on your own, but to have the conversation with people about it too. So yeah, that's our hope for sure.
No, that's amazing. It struck me from a lot of what you shared, just the importance of community. One of my questions is kind of going to be, what does it look like for Christians to navigate mental health well? And I think actually you've spoken to that in a sense already, in terms of, in your experience, having, you know, close friends and family get around you, and for you to have a space to be able to be honest with them, but also for people to kind of meet you where you're at, and you know, be willing to pray for you. And yeah, have you got any other kind of suggestions of, especially, I guess, as we've acknowledged, you know, the church kind of sometimes, and I think is increasingly dealing really well with this topic of mental health, but perhaps at times can be unhelpful. Have you seen this? Have you got any other suggestions of kind of where you've seen mental health be really dealt with well, or spoken about well within a church context?
Oh, that's a really good question. I feel like, yeah, I have. I feel like you said, it's amazing that we are getting more equipped to, as a church, as the church. Um, but I would say also, there's just a beautiful thing. What I love about church is like the multi generations, and the fact that you can um, have a friend who's 65, but also who's
Yeah.
18, and we're like all learning together. Like, we are. I am so grateful for those older people in our church that have such wisdom on life, and, you know, human things and struggles and joys and just of life. And I think that is such a beautiful difference. That's such a beautiful, what's the word? Um, Anomaly? No, that's not even the word. But I think that's something that's so significant about the body of Christ, is the multi generations, that it's not just all young people, it's not just all old people. It's like we get to learn from one another. And so I think I'd encourage people to be bold, to go up to those people that inspire you in church, or who have, you know, that have struggled, you know, that have you know, tackled things, or their stories. Like, I think, be bold, go have a coffee with someone that you'd love to chat with, and like get them to tell you their story, or even younger people, like, what they're being a mentor for those, the younger people even. Like, I think that's something really empowering, is that when you're giving to, it's not always receiving, but when you like give something to, I think there's real power in that, when you're active in yeah, the giving part. So I think, yeah, take advantage of the wide breadth of the church, of the wisdom that is inside. And I've learned a lot from that, from people.
I guess it reminds me of that, you know, you use the analogy of kind of the book for you and Jane being a way of wanting to kind of pass on the baton. And I guess it's like an encouragement for people to firstly receive the baton from people older and more experienced for them, but also be willing to give it on to the next generation.
Totally.
So I'd love to briefly talk. Obviously, we mentioned at the start that you are a very gifted singer-songwriter, and I know we haven't really touched on that much, but you did mention how in the book there is a song for every kind of every theme every day. What for you is this kind of intersection between mental health and music? I'm kind of assuming that there was some significance for it in your journey, kind of through this kind of healing journey. But yeah, could you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I love music anyway, and worship music has been such an integral part of my healing and journey with anxiety. And there'd be times when I wouldn't know what to do, but I would know what song I would want to listen to that's going to encourage me. And one song in particular was this song called Praise Before My Breakthrough, which is a song by Brian and Katie Torwall. And I just remember having that song on loop and loop and loop, because that's what I wanted. Like, I'm going to praise before my breakthrough, that truth of like, before I see it, before I am well, like, I'm going to praise before my breakthrough. as an encouragement, and that that spurred me on to keep worshiping in my home about my day. But I think music is just so powerful, and we know that, like in the Bible, that beautiful story of David, playing the harp for King Saul, that was a relief for the dark spirit in his soul. There's it's biblical that music has an impact, that those melodies and sounds, that it resonates in our body, it resonates in our mind. And I know for me in my journey too, even the songwriting process was quite significant in how do I write about this? How do I go about this? What do I want to say? How do I, because I love to songwrite anyway, and I love to process through songwriting and in my prayers. But there's this one song that I'm going to release soon, and it's called By Fear, and it talks all about that, really, just saying bye to fear, get out. And the lyrics all about, I'm changing the locks, how it creeps in through the back door, but actually it's no more, do not come back, take your stuff off the floor, get out. And peace would you make yourself at home within me, love, come in, joy, come in. And that song for me has been a beautiful declaration. And even leading it is so I get so nervous leading it, because I know what's about to happen, the shift in the room, and the fear that is about to leave in the room, that I know the enemy doesn't want me to ever sing it, but it's such a real thing for me that I know I need to keep pushing into and keep declaring with people. It's by fear, get out, no more of this generation, no more of the older generations or the generations, get out, please do not come back. It's it's a bit of a battle. And so
yeah, definitely
for me, music it's been so important. And even instrumental music, those times when I didn't even want words to listen to, my mind was too crowded, instrumental music was just so beautiful and peaceful. And my friend Cephas, he writes beautiful instrumental music, and I would just put his music on all the time. And so I think it's a really significant thing. And even if you're not musical, even if you don't sing or lead worship, the power of worship music in our home is amazing. To fill our home with truth and praise is more powerful than you think.
That's amazing. I look forward to hearing. You say it's called By Fear, the song that's coming out.
Yes. It should be out by the time this is out, so hopefully.
Final question is just to kind of ground this, I guess, in people's everyday reality and context. So if there's someone listening to this today, which we hope there are some, specifically maybe a Christian who's thinking, how can I support those who maybe in my workplace or my street or my friendship group who are struggling with their mental health? How can I support those people? What would be your kind of takeaway things maybe have helped you that people have supported you in doing? And what would you say to people?
Yeah, I mean, prayer is always amazing, isn't it? Praying with them, but also from afar, I think it's so powerful. But one thing that I would say that my husband did for me so kindly was, in moments of anxiety, in moments of panic, even panic attacks or whatever it looked like, even things I wanted to do in the day, he would ask the question, is this something that you would like me to cover you in? Is this something that you would like me to just kind of do for now? Or is this something that you'd love me to encourage you to tackle today, to push you in and be come on, go on, do it, get in.
Yeah.
So an example for me was forever I had this fear of driving, and I didn't learn to drive until my eldest son was born. He was 8 weeks old, and I managed to pass through absolute grit and sweat and tears. But I remember even after I passed my test, so fearful. I didn't want to drive anywhere. I just would avoid it. I would get my husband Tom to drive still and pick me up in different spots. But I remember this one morning, and he knew what was going on. He knew he knows it all. But I remember walking out our front door, and going to get into the passenger seat, and he was already sitting there, and he was like, come on, let's do this. Get in the driver's seat. Let's go. Come on. We're going to tackle it. We're going to try this today. We're going to try this fear. And like instant like panic, but also like this rush of confidence. Like, wow, if you believe, if you're believing in me today, even though I do not believe in myself in this today, I'm, you know, but I think the power of community and friends is like maybe asking that question to your friends is like, is this something that I can like really challenge you in today? Can I push you in this? Can I like, we both want you to be free in this area or to tackle this today, or is it too much today? Can I just cover you in that? Yeah, no, I'll go buy that for you, or I'll take that to the post office today. Like, I don't know. I think it's there's such power in that. So yeah, I
love that.
would encourage. Yeah.
Cover or encourage.
Yeah, exactly.
Ellie, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been so good to speak with you. And thank you particularly for your openness on what can be a very vulnerable topic. We've really appreciated that. Tell us, Ellie, what are you up to at the moment? Is there any exciting project you're working on? And how can we keep track of you and what you're up to?
Oh, very kind, guys. Thank you for having me, honestly. I guess you can keep in contact with me on Insta, Elle_Limebear. Ellie without an I, that is bizarre. But I'm working, I've basically finished my new album, so that will be coming out, and hopefully when this podcast is out, a few songs will be out. But I'm really excited to release new music. It's been like 5 years since I've released new songs. So that is, I'm really excited about these new batch of songs. But I guess continue to talk about the book too. We're going on different, we just finished our book club too, so maybe starting another book club online. But yeah, lots of exciting things, and just raising up my two little boys. So that's what I'm up to.
Very good. And how old are they? Did you say that you had 8 weeks? Was it 8 weeks after you'd given birth you passed your test? Did I get that chronology right?
Yes. So he's 3.
So how old is that young man now? He's 3.
He's 3.
There we are.
Yeah, and then I've got a little 1-year-old too. So we're in it.
Very good. What are their names, Ellie?
Maccabee is 3, and then Wilson has just turned 1.
Strong names. Well, shout out to Maccabee and Wilson, probably our youngest listeners. So good to talk with you boys. Ellie, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed it.
So, Paul, what were your thoughts on today's episode?
Well, I thought Ellie was raw and open, which I really appreciated. I thought it was so interesting that she located the source of her anxiety in a fear of death. And I thought it's interesting, isn't it? Because if mental health has a stigma associated with it and is a topic that often historically hasn't been talked about, though it's talked increasingly about now, probably the other topic is death. And perhaps that's one for us to give thought to in terms of the next season of the Whole Life podcast. I thought the sort of acknowledgement that the existence of anxiety, of course, it is partly shaped by and maybe exacerbated by the culture in which we live. So social media can increase anxiety and conflict, and it can lead to loss of sleep. At the same time, wanting to recognize that regardless of the particular point in history that we live, there can be different reasons for being anxious. And maybe part of that is because anxiety is often something that we think about in terms of ourselves in relation to others. And maybe part of that is around comparison. So if we're all going through the same trauma, then in a sense you're comparing yourself with others. If you're not going through that trauma but another trauma, you're comparing yourself with others. So I think it's kind of interesting trying to just get my head around that a little bit. And then I thought 2 other things, Grace. One was really interesting hearing her talk about anxiety in the relationship with the Christian story, and the way that she drew attention to the fact that that is present there, whether it's in the Psalms or whether it's in Gethsemane. And I thought that was interesting. And then just, having that opportunity to track that motif a little bit throughout the Christian story is interesting. But then ultimately what she was obviously saying is that for her, the if you like, the solution to this has been a growing sense of who she is and who she's created to be. But what then I also felt was so helpful was her reference to the significance of community. And I was such a strong theme, wasn't it? And this sort of sense, I suppose, in part that we're not created to live alone, and therefore, where anxiety exists in us, often, the tendency is to be isolated from others. But in fact, part of the solution to that is to to seek the help of others and to tackle this together in the context of community. And then obviously that leads to a discussion around the church. So I thought lots of themes were tracked and really interesting, and again, just helpful, having Ellie speak about this not as a sort of medic or a kind of mental health professional, but someone for whom this has been real and she's been dealing with it. So they were some thoughts from me. What about you, Grace?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd say especially on the last point, just in terms of, I think Ellie sort of spoke herself, didn't she, about the fact that actually the tendency for her, especially kind of at the start, was to almost mask what she was experiencing, even from, she was saying, when she first told her friends and family, actually what she was thinking and feeling. And, she spoke about that time, didn't she, when she wrote down all the things that she would do if she didn't have this sense of fear gripping her. And actually how, I think, yeah, even just there's something about, and I don't think it's just true of anxiety, I think of lots of mental health issues, that there is this kind of, yeah, she spoke about that sense of shame and of pride that I think was also very honest of her, to say actually we don't want to give off that impression of struggling, or of maybe not having our ducks in a row as much as it seems like we do. And I think Ellie, as she referred to herself as someone who is full of joy and is clearly got lots of energy and love for life. And so actually I think it says a lot that there's this kind of this part of all of us that's sometimes hidden, which means that actually if we don't bring it into the light, whether that's through conversation with friends, family, or mental health professionals, that actually it can kind of I suppose it festers and takes root, and before we know it, it's kind of controlling us. I think, but actually something that I was encouraged by, well, I was encouraged by all of it, but especially when we asked her about this kind of how the church has maybe been unhelpful at times, but how we can kind of navigate that today. And I think actually she spoke really positively about actually how, I think she first said, the reality is that we're all human, and there is a line which we need to be aware of in terms of over spiritualizing things. And I think I'm a great believer of, there's a place for prayer, and there's also a place for professional help. And I think sometimes in the church, I've definitely, been in conversations where, one of those is heavily emphasized over the other. And I think actually that's something very unique that we carry within the Christian context, is that actually, God is involved in all of life. And whether that means that he has given a medical professional wisdom to be able to help us, and also amazing friends who are able to get alongside us and pray. And I think that was really evident in what kind of Ellie shared about the people that have clearly been really significant. Obviously her husband being one. I love the idea of do you want me to cover you today, or do you want me to encourage you today? Because I think there's a proactiveness sometimes, and I suppose maybe that comes into this resilience question that you asked as well, doesn't it? Of actually there's we can't be completely passive when it comes to our own mental health. Actually, it's like we're the ones kind of embodying it. And so actually sometimes it's a bit like going to the gym sometimes, isn't there? There's a sense of actually I don't really want to go, but probably should. And I think sometimes it's the same with our varying levels of mental health, that actually sometimes we we need to kind of take a bit of ownership and reach out. And I love that idea of having somebody that's like cheering you on, kind of encouraging you in that. So yeah, really brilliant episode. And I think, as you say, it helps so much to have it grounded in somebody's experience, lived experience. So yeah.
Very practical, really. Quite a lot of what Ellie was drawing attention to. So helpful in terms of thinking, well, how do we process this, every day? of the week. And interesting, I mean, Grace, obviously, speaking as you have, you are, it's because you do not have this sacred secular divide that obviously we're so keen to kind of draw attention to and debunk, that it all matters. So whether we're getting help through prayer, or whether it's because a mental health professional's getting alongside us, that's all part of the world that God has made and put together, and we're designed to flourish in that. So great. Well, very good. Thank you. Very good conversation.
Amazing. Well, if you enjoyed this episode of The Whole Life with Ellie today, then we'd love you to subscribe to the podcast and recommend it to your friends if you think, which we hope you will, that there's something they could learn from it too. But until next time, from Paul and me, that was The Whole Life. Goodbye, everyone, and we hope you'll join us again soon.
Goodbye.